What's up, Devils Nation? Welcome into another edition of Coach's Corner. I am your host, Andrew Romanella, and today I am joined by head cross-country coach, John Cahill. Coach Cahill, thank you for joining Coach's Corner.
Thank you. This is exciting to be here.
Well, we're super excited to have you. And let's dive right into it because I'm super excited to hear about your coaching journey, but I know the Devils fans are as well. So where did you start your coaching career and how did you get into the cross-country coaching world?
Yeah, so I feel like typical that I always was a coach at some point. I think that's just who I was as a person because my dad coached me in soccer, baseball, all those kind of fun things. And, later I just fell into running because I always had this sort of natural speed. So I think my dad was just that kind of a big influence for me. And then just sort of the influences I had, running, because I think everyone has their own experience with just running, right? Because everyone always has their own input. So I feel like how people inspired me kind of came from a couple of different things, right? My dad was a runner. So I think that just was, again, a big, parameter. And I'm like, I got to be faster than him. There's no way. Which I was, but he's not going to like that. And then just, the high school coaches I had, for example, they were, fantastic. They were a little bit, of that old school mentality, but I think the big running, phenomenon that, basically came up in the 70s, that's where that sort of influence was. And that's when we start to see a lot of research going on, and of course it sort of adapts as we get through. And then that's kind of where the other influence I had with some of the coaches I started with at Dwight Englewood, at the upper school there in Englewood, New Jersey. And that's really where a lot of it, the whole story began of me physically getting paid to coach, right? Because that's where you feel like you make it. And that's kind of where I was influenced by a couple of different individuals there. And they, again, I think had a little bit of some younger coaching experience, in addition to running, right? Because that's what's so exciting about it. You may run for, the 4 years, but you quite literally, you're still running, right? I'm still running. There's a reason 80-year-olds are competing in marathons and half marathons. They're crazy and they love it. And I guess I'm crazy too, but I enjoy it. You don't stop and you never stop coaching and really learning from the sport. It's just ongoing, really.
So you mentioned your dad as a big influence for you. You mentioned your coaches at Dwight Englewood and a few others. Are there certain parts of their coaching styles that you look to emulate on a daily basis with your coaching style?
In the world of running, you kind of mimic what other people will do. One, from physically running, right? Because when you see someone with great, arm movement, or, you're just, what good running looks like, right? And you kind of emulate it in yourself. So you kind of visualize it and you kind of put it together. So I guess there's just seeing other runners do it, right? And, some of these coaches, most successful ones, always had a good narrative to teach, right? And I think certainly one of my high school, teacher and, coach, and he would just go on with these stories that, I don't know what really they were, or, but there was this, lesson you learned in them. And I think that's important because that's kind of what coaching really is. It's leaving some sort of influence on these athletes. And, it's not always about athletics because, the athletics can come and go, but really the lessons you can learn about, being on time and really caring about one another. That I think that's always what's, certainly stood out to me. Another coach, just coming to my mind, I think of Alex Champ. She's always up to date with any kind of running material that it is. And I think that really just stands out. And, from what I learned from her, it's as much as you're running, it's a lot of, you try the workout and see what works for you. I think overall, the lesson I've learned or kind of calibrated from all these coaches is, it's what you did 2 years ago doesn't always work. And you have to constantly adapt. I think that's really what's worked for me.
I've gotten to know that you do go beyond in terms of what you teach your student athletes. And in turn, you have a group of very respectful on the men's and women's sides, student athletes in a Devils uniform running cross country here. So talk to us about what you look for in an FDU Devil when they come to run for Coach Cahill.
Yeah. And, it does stem, and thank you. It's great working with you in the office. So I look for, that work ethic that, again, is just more than just running, right? And, we obviously, co-curriculars are always fun, but somebody that puts value into what they're doing. I don't like hi, how are you? I'm good, thank you. That's boring, right? That kind of routine, shake it up from that routine. And I think it's somebody that puts great value into something, and it goes into those smaller kind of conversations. And that's what makes me stand out, especially when I speak to maybe a recruit or somebody within our program too, right? Because things are never just one dimensional, right? We have to see what else defines in that person. So I think that's necessarily what I'm looking for. But perhaps it's kind of tougher to explain in one word. So I guess a sense of value is kind of what I'm always looking for in an athlete, and you could tell a lot in certainly the first couple sentences, right, or lack of, right, and that's kind of necessarily what I'm looking to either expand upon that for that person, or see what their depths are. That's kind of where it comes into, and then we'll talk running. Everyone always likes that later.
Absolutely. It's the values and the important things first, and then it's the athletics after. So with that being said, talk to us about some of those values and those philosophies overall that you stress to your program every single year.
I've kind of formed into this phrase of saying what's in front. And I've learned that to, kind of dive into the character of the team, because it's very open-ended, right? That could mean anything. What is in front? And there's certainly your opportunity. There's, getting a possible personal record, right? There's so much that's happening. And it's also keeping you, one, physically just, in check, right? Because I don't want anybody turning. I want you, looking certainly straight ahead. But there's so much more opportunity, because even, when you get to these runners that are, they're the fastest, and it's like, oh, it's a guarantee you're going to win this race, although we know there's no guarantee, but you have a pretty good edge on it. You know what, time's always a factor, and time is always racing against you. And when you realize that, that's when you overcome those obstacles, and also that's when your time starts to go down. But there's always a challenge that's happening in the race. There's never any kind of easy moments, and you're on edge for the whatever amount of time or the distance, I should say, that you're running, and you have to make all these moves, and you're thinking, I mean, these races, yeah, I'm the one that's maybe cheering you on, but there's not much conversation happening among runners, right? Everyone's just breathing really heavy. So there's really not much of these kind of cues and, things that are happening. And a lot of it is, again, that self-reflection that's happening. So, for our team, that's what we focus on a lot, is a lot of that self-reflection. And that's where we have these conversations. And sometimes it's more on that individual coach on, athlete, but then also it's these group, conversations, because all of a sudden you may have had the same issues as somebody else in a race, right? And it could be a plethora of course, different things, but how do you weigh, how do you handle all that? And it's those direct conversations. And I'm a very direct and honest person. I think that's kind of the key element of, I think, the program overall, because, if a workout doesn't work, or, you're feeling fatigued and tired, tell me. I mean, that's the reality, right? Because you're not going to get any better doing an extra 800 or an extra 1,000-meter repeat. It doesn't work. So that kind of honesty is what we try to put into the program, day in day. And it's again, it's always morphing. It's, what's the reality? Because by the end of the week, yeah, you might be tired. Maybe some time off does work.
There's no doubt you've had to have some honest conversations with your team in the last few months. And I know that this fall has looked significantly different than other falls. And it was probably a hard conversation. So can you talk to us a little bit about the message you delivered to your team during this difficult time, and kind of what their response has been and how you guys are trekking forward in this difficult time?
It's challenging, especially since the weather is so nice for any activity outside right now. Like it's perfect autumn, right? If you haven't had a pumpkin spice latte, you need to get out there now. The conversation, I mean, it's tough, right? That's just it was certainly a tough growing as we kept going, right? It's ever growing. I feel like I almost have that kind of conversation every day, right? Because there's so much more information that keeps coming out. But the message was, we're moving forward, and what's the next step, right? Because I think that's always what's keeping everyone active and keeps you on your feet, instead of wallowing and wondering what's going to happen. So we focused on the secret to running cross country. Who it turns out it's just running. Who would have thought? So that's what we did, right? And that's what we're continuing to do, right? Because again, you focus on the individual side of it, and I think collectively we're as we're in this semester, we're trying to focus more on the group aspect of it. And the individual side of it is, yeah, they're still focusing on their running, they're still focusing on their workout, and I think it's just trying to come together a little bit more. And again, maybe that's a little bit more of a newer development, but I think that's the ultimate goal going forward. And we're there's still potential for virtual races, which I'm excited about. And then of course going into the spring too. So it's a little bit it's a cute setback, but we got bigger fish to fry.
Coach Cahill, throughout this entire interview, you have clearly showed your passion and your energy for coaching, for Fairleigh Dickinson University, and for your student athletes. Yeah. The last question I have for you today on Coach's Corner. Mm-hmm. There's a young coach out there thinking about taking this journey. What bit of advice do you have for them before they dive into the coaching world?
Yeah. You have to coach at any kind of level, whether you got to volunteer, figure it out, or even coach yourself, right? Because a lot of it is definitely the experience. You need to mess up a lot and learn what the right workouts are. And because I'm still, I get it. It's amazing what I've learned just within the year at Fairleigh Dickinson, right? It's other than the paperwork, but all the fun aspects of coaching and putting everything together. That's you have to go out and you have to coach in some sort of parameter. Another sort of tidbit I think is important because we live in that world. And I've said this and we've talked about it in the, I'm big into podcasts, and, if you love listening to your own sound of the voice, make your own too. But, you can really learn a lot from them. And it's, again, there's always active conversations. I'm big into, again, listening to former coaches if they've retired, or current coaches. And even certainly doctors too, right? Because they're, again, going to sometimes it goes above your head, right? Because it's very scientific, but understanding, again, those basic biomechanics of what's happening with running, and that, again, you need to just listen and kind of adapt it from there. But I think those are some really important things that you could really pick up, and, because we're always driving, we're always commuting, you're Ubering, however you're getting around, you could easily listen to a podcast. And I found that to be really effective. And I think we're becoming more auditory kind of individuals anyway. So it doesn't hurt. And there's always new ones coming out, and it's fantastic. And who would have thought there'd be running ones, but there are, right? And it's exciting. So I love listening to those. Those are a very good go-to. So I would say those are your, best literal, kind of concepts. And I think finding, again, who you value and, or what you value as a person. Because I think if you put that forward, going into, a young career as a coach, I think you'll stick to your guns pretty well there.
I think waking up every day with a learning mindset is the greatest mindset you could possibly have as a coach. And I think that's some of the best advice you could possibly give. Listen, follow the Devils cross country program on Instagram and Twitter. It's at Devils FDUXC, and follow Coach Cahill at Coach John Cahill on Instagram and Twitter. Coach, I can't thank you enough for the energy you brought to Coach's Corner today and for taking some time to sit down with me.
Yeah, this was fantastic. Now, this was a really great time. I'm so glad to have done this.
The head coach of our men's and women's cross country programs, John Cahill. Coach Cahill, horns up.
Great, thank you.